Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Street Tales. I've got Major Crime Sergeant Chris Farley, and I've got my buddy BJ, Deputy Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. We're going to get into a few things, just talk about different types of law enforcement. Sergeant Farley is in the Major Crime Squad. They deal with homicides, child sex assaults, anything that local smaller agencies in Maine aren't able to handle. He's got a vast array of experience from negotiator, chases. He was actually in my cadre when I went through Maine State Police training. And Chris, I appreciate you being here, man. I'll kick it to you.
All right, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be on.
Very happy about it. Very happy about it. Well, I wanted to start off just as I kind of do anybody who's new to the podcast. Can you tell me a little about growing up, where you grew up, how you kind of got into law enforcement overall? Training, education, sports, whatever it was.
Yeah. I grew up small town down in Massachusetts, just outside of probably 45 minutes south of Boston, just 20 minutes north of Cape Cod. Grew up there. I was one of the typical guys playing 3 sports. Loved football and went to St. Anselm College up in Manchester, New Hampshire. Had the opportunity to play little college ball there for a couple of years before I blew my shoulders out. Spent 4 years there, and then they had a unique program at college where they offered some part-time police work in the town of York as a beach cop. So I had a chance to, my summers, my junior year and senior year, were literally spent riding a pedal bike up and down the beach all summer long. So that's where I got my taste to it. Did an internship with some federal agencies from school, and then after I got out of college, it's back in so it would have been 4 or 5. The law enforcement jobs were a lot harder to get back then than they are now. The people were applying for more than the jobs. So went up to Maine, worked at a local PD for about 1.5 years, 2 years there. I went to the academy. And then after finishing up the academy at the local police department, I jumped over to the state where I've been ever since. Most of my career has been, I started 5.5 years as a rural trooper, so I'm no different than what people think of law enforcement. I went to domestics, car chases, car crashes, thefts, burglaries, probation violations, all that stuff. I did that for about 5.5, 6 years, and then I got promoted to detective, and I think that's where I was actually a detective when I came up to be cadre, and did that for about 6 years, and then got promoted to patrol sergeant, went back to the road, did some patrol supervisor work, and then promoted back into the major crimes unit, and been here ever since. So
now, was law enforcement something you always wanted to do, or did it develop over time?
So I think it was something I always wanted to do. I don't know what got me into it, but I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement. I originally actually thought I wanted to, go the federal route for a little bit, but I got the taste of some, the patrol work, and I liked the fact of being out and about, running calls, running a gun and chasing. I like that style versus kind of doing more straight up plain clothes work. And I figured it would give me good experience if I did end up wanting to go to bed. So that's why I stayed with the local and then the state for a while.
Got it. So where did you start in Maine? You said you worked for a local?
Yeah, a small town called Bridgeton. It was like a seven-man department. So, rural, small community. You're going to calls by yourself. You're going to domestics solo. You're doing your own investigations. You're covering everything by yourself. And I liked it. We were steady, but where I was, it's located in Cumberland County, which is probably 45 minutes outside of Portland. I was hearing all the troopers and everybody else running all this other stuff, and I was stuck in one small little square area. So that's what made the jump over to the state a little bit easier. Plus, they had a little more chance for opportunities for being a negotiator, working homicides, stuff like that. So it gave me more of a chance to kind of see what police work really had.
So that kind of ties into my next question. So is that what prompted you to go to state? Is that you wanted to work like special team stuff, or just what kind of transferred you over to the state?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of twofold. Like I interacted with a lot of, because where I was working as a local officer, a lot of my backup at the time were some deputy sheriffs, but a lot of it was troopers coming through. It was kind of a hub for the troopers to go north and south, and we were the town that was like pulling open. They had the gas and everything. So I liked how they handled themselves, and then I liked the chance for doing. I really did want to do some sort of homicides, and I thought they offered that opportunity along with all the specialties. So yeah.
Well, so at this point, I'm going to kind of kick it over to BJ a little bit, because we talked about this a little bit before, Chris, you and I, but so it's different in Maine. And actually, before I kick over to BJ, can you explain how Maine works? Because not all agencies, not all law enforcement departments work their own sex crimes or murders. Some of them have to kick it to the state, because that's different than he works for large sheriff deputy office in Florida, and BJ's also in the bomb team, but that was actually a new experience for me. Can you articulate that a little bit, and then I'm going to kick it to BJ.
Yeah, Maine's like, especially the state police, we're pretty unique in the sense that in Maine we do all the homicides outside of the cities of Portland and Bangor. So you even have a city that's just outside of Portland will work, or Lewiston, Auburn. Will work the homicides in those cities. And then how the state police work is we're very similar to, I know, like down south, like we do more than just the highways. Like we do have our patrols that cover, 90 to 95 corridor. Mm-hmm. But we also have rural patrol troopers they respond to domestics. They have a patrol area, they patrol towns, they handle your domestics, your assaults, your DVs, and any crime you can think of, they handle. And then because the state's so rural up here, a lot of the sheriff's offices have agreements with the state police in certain areas of the state, like we'll cover certain towns, the sheriffs cover their other towns, and then we kind of go back and forth. But yeah, homicides, it's just us and the two big cities in the state that can do them. So, which is very unique. Not a lot of states have that anymore, especially state-wise. It's usually a Bureau of Investigation, something along those lines. But yeah, it's the difference up here.
Gotcha. BJ, can you speak on how Hillsborough handles that, and kind of what got you the special teams for Hillsborough? Because I think it is something that's unique.
Yeah, man. Well, Chris, obviously, welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you.
I gotta say, when Tyler went up to Maine State Police, I mean, you can speak to this, but down south it's kind of like the inverse, right? So our state police doesn't, and I hate to say this so widely, but our state police doesn't necessarily do the investigation part for us. It's mostly just highways and byways, all the state roads, mostly crashes, some of our interdiction stuff. So to kind of see and hear, and I've always known this. I know a couple cities from up north that I know, and it's always kind of interesting to hear how they basically do what we do down south. It's just the opposite. But I do have, while you were talking, I had a question like, how was your transition process from one agency to the other? How was that for you?
Yeah, so for me, that was actually relatively easy. Easy's a loose term, but up here, the way our academy works is every state, county, and local guy goes to the same academy for 18 weeks. And then after that 18 weeks is over, we're all certified through the state. And then the state police does another, it's shorter now, but when I went through, it was either 7 or 10 week academy where it was just state police going over, similar to how it is probably down in Florida, like FHP has their own academy. It's just a shorter version of that.
Yeah.
But we all have to go to the same local, so I only had to do a shorter academy versus the full 18 weeks plus that.
How was do you think the processing time was a little bit boosted, or did you kind of know some of those guys ahead of time and make the process easier? Do you think you would have gone so easy if you, didn't know anybody in the office ahead of time?
Yeah, I think knowing people at the time made it a little easier. I knew a couple of the troopers that worked in the training unit at the time, so they kind of helped speed up the process, and they were trying to create, back then, so that would have been '07, they were just coming, it was like the 7th year out of going to this joint academy. The state police used to have a just state police academy prior to that. So knowing those guys kind of made the process a little bit smoother because, I could put them down as references. Plus, they kind of guided me through the process a little bit, what to expect, what the academy was going to be like. So it did help having somebody there.
Okay. I forgot your other question. I was locked in on his answers. I apologize.
It was more just how, because in the state police typically has to handle murders, major crime, like rapes, things like that. In Hillsborough County, that's all internalized. But in Maine, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you might have to drive 2, 3, 4 hours to go help a smaller agency or even some rural towns that don't have any law enforcement whatsoever. And state police, major crimes is the one that goes and takes that over.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that would definitely never happen. I would say for that. I mean, you got. No, if anything, they'll try to kick it over to you. I don't want to say do less work, but I mean, I would say there's another agency close to where we are, where we literally pulled out the measuring tape at times and be like, hey, this is 150 feet on north of this road. This one's yours. You guys got to tape it. And yeah, so that's definitely a process. Now, I can't say there's some things that I was involved in, but it was different to have another agency take over an investigation that I was involved in. So, like I said, that's not something that typically happens, but just in listening to in the history, but I guess that would kind of have to be the way to go. Do you think is it that way because of the resources, or just because of like training level, or just the size of the agency? Like what dictates you guys taking over investigations for other places?
When it comes to non-homicides, a lot of that is, does the agency want to take it over, or do they? You got some agencies that are a chief and one other guy, so they may not have the time devoted to work a sex assault case or something like that. Where it comes to the homicides, it's basically through our Attorney General's office, the statutes that basically says it's us, Portland and Bangor, investigate the homicides. So and I think the big thing that it's the resources up here. You probably have, I don't know what the numbers are, maybe 2,000. Maybe 3,000 at the most cops from top to bottom, and I can go 8 hours north and still be in the state. So, for a huge state, it's not a lot of resources. So we take the lead on the investigations, but I sometimes hate that term because some people think we just come in and push these local agencies out when we take over, but we actually work side by side with them. We'll just be the charging agency, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
work in some of these cities, these agencies, and even the sheriff's offices up here, they know they have, 5 detectives. Our unit's got 15. Plus, we can pull detectives in across the state and, put 45 detectives in an area pretty quick. So we rely on the local sheriffs and officers they know their people. And we just work right with them, and then we'll take the lead on it, and they'll be right there with us, helping us. So it truly is a joint effort.
Okay, yeah, I mean that makes sense. Now, the way you describe it, is it more kind of like a task force, or would it be maybe like a task force, but just on a lesser degree when it comes to those kinds of things?
No, I'd say it's not really a task force because it's really agency dependent. Like the areas that we were down here, we have some bigger sheriff's departments. So our people will go out and do the work, but we'll just bring one of the officers or deputies with us to help us out, as they may have that rapport with whoever we're dealing with, as they've dealt with them 100 times on whatever they're dealing with. So it's kind of that agency specific on who we interact with, because we have some agencies that will go right in and, whether it's their young and inexperienced, never done that, and we'll just kind of keep them in the loop to a degree. And then other times we'll have guys with us. I've had local officers let them, our arrest warrant, they'll come with us and we'll let them put the handcuffs on the guy when we charge him with murder. So it's really agency dependent upon how involved these agencies are with us. We try to use them a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, Chris, I want to get back to how we met because you were a part of the cadre for when I switched over to state police from Hillsborough County.
Yeah.
You and I laughed about it, but I want your perspective first because I remember my first day, and I'll talk about it in a second. But what do you recall from? And also, can you go into like what the overall training was?
Yeah. So back then, what was it? Was it 10 weeks back then? I think it was 10.
Yeah, I think it was close to 10.
I think it was 10 weeks. So it was a residential academy, 10 weeks. It was just those who were with the state police. And it was, I would call it high stress for the first couple touring and scenario based training, along with, you had your academic classes during the day, do scenarios during the evening or during the day too. And, every scenario, you support scenarios to investigative scenarios to how do you deal with stress? How does your body react to stress? What's your body's limits when it comes to being put under stress in a controlled environment where, the cadre staff could dictate who gets stressed, how much stress they get, can they handle it, what's their reaction, and then how are they documenting all the stuff they're doing. So I think best way to put it is a residential 10-week academy up in Hillsborough at the Criminal Justice Academy that sponsors just where all law enforcement officers in the state go. So, what was the other part of the question?
What do you recall from from my training class?
There's lots of things I think I recall from so your training class. What was my first training class as a cadre, and we had a pretty experienced group of cadre staff there. I think I was, in theory, the junior guy with, I think, like 12, 13 years on. I was the junior guy with the academy staff. But I remember, I'll never forget it, they brief us a week prior on who we have coming in and what their background is. And they said you're a deputy out of Florida and you play D1 football. And you show up on day one, and I remember seeing you and went, oh boy, this is a big individual right here. But what I won't forget is that night we did the PT test on that. It's an indoor track up above our, we call it TAC Center, Fitness Center. And you're running it, and I think might have been one of the other cadre staff. We looked at each other and said, a man that big is not supposed to move that fast. So I'll never forget that, going, oh boy, it's going to be an interesting week for some of our defensive tactics scenarios we got coming up. And sure as hell was.
No, yeah. I remember that well, and because I had already been a deputy at that point for 6 years and then transitioned to state trooper. And I still stand by it. I made this comment early on in some of the episodes, but I think the training was excellent. I think it's by far one of the best training experiences I've had. But now that you're reminding me, I remember that. And again, a lot of the guys that were in my training class had already done the BLEPI is what they called it, Basic Law Enforcement something Academy. But I didn't. They were all geared up and they kind of had an idea of what to expect. I had no idea. I'm just kind of like showing up like, all right, let's do this thing. And right when we park in the parking lot, getting yelled, screamed at, running up and down. I can't remember the defensive tactics sergeant, drawing a blank, but he brimmed me in the face and I'm like, what is going on? And we get to Friday and I didn't know about Friday fights. And actually, BJ, I don't know that I've told you about Friday fights. I can't remember who my first one was, but Dave, try to refrain from using names. I ended up working with this guy as a deputy or as a trooper. And him and I were fighting, and I threw my hat at him, and I slapped him in the face. And he's like, dude, I think you can cuss me for like 2 weeks. But could you talk about Friday fights? Because I don't think I actually told BJ about that.
Yeah. I'll get into it because it's basically it's a scenario on back then. It was on the Friday of week 1, and they call it the Fallen Troopers course. And what it is we call you down into wherever the scenario is taking place, and you're told basically go on the mat and arrest whoever you're dealing with. They got a warrant for, you make it up, a warrant for, DV assault on their wife or something. And you go around the corner, you get onto the mats, and it is, when I say a fight, there's no punches, there's no closed fist stuff, but it is a full-on altercation. And I think that lasts for a little bit. I don't know the actual time, but it's quite a while full-on fighting to see how the individual reacts. Because, some cops, if they come to the academy, never been slapped in the face, so they don't know what it's like, what their body's going to do.
Correct.
You have that fight for, I don't even want to say how long it is, but it's say 3 minutes. I think it's something like 2 or 3 minutes.
Feels like forever.
3 minutes feels like 10. And after that time, no matter what position you're at, whether you're either starting to gain control or you're not, you're sent up and you're sent on some sort of run or physical challenge. I think at the time it was run around the academy, wasn't it, Tyler?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
So you run around the academy, you go up a flight of stairs. There may be a task at the top, but you go up and down them a couple times, like you're in a foot pursuit chasing. The cadre member's there with you the whole time. That's your person that you're pursuing. You'll do some sort of fine motor skill, technique, whether it's writing your name, remembering a saying. They do all sorts of stuff. Then you go back into the TAC center and they put you in. They give you the sim rounds, the sim helmet, and they make you engage in a deadly force situation with a paper target. When you're done that, you then get geared back down and you go right back onto the mat and in another struggle for another, I think it's like 90 seconds or 2 minutes. Don't quote me on the time. But you actually put him in custody. You have to physically put him in handcuffs and then put him in the cruiser, search him, put him in the cruiser, use the radio in, you got the guy in custody, and then the scenario breaks. And then when you're done that, you actually have to go back and fully write a report on what you just did.
Correct. And to my recollection, I think we did that every Friday. And I've drawn that point because when I went through the academy at Hillsborough County, I think we had like a fight for your life scenario, but it was only like one. We only did one that I can recall. We did different defensive tactics and we did a lot more time on certain trainings. But to me, having been a deputy, every time I was like, that was exhausting, but that's incredibly accurate for when shit pops off. And then being able to then have to recall and write, it was excellent law enforcement training. And now I'm remembering more stuff, but I think, cause I didn't know all the rules. So I think I was at fish hooking and they were like, whoa, don't do that. And I was about to elbow and knee. They're like, bro, stop. I was like, I don't know what's going on. This dude's fighting. I'm going to beat the shit out of him. I was like, oh, we're hitting like that? Okay. It was excellent.
I think that's what makes that training in my mind so good is like, that's your natural reaction. Like, all right, It's on, which is fine, but you still have to learn that we have tools or we have whatever. And then, I think it shows a lot of people too what this, you played college ball, I played college football, but, done some hard things. I remember doing mine and being like, holy crap, I don't think I have ever been through anything that physically exhausting. And then the mental aspect of it after, to be able to articulate why you did what you did, really applies out here. 'Cause it's control. It doesn't feel it at the time, but that's about as control be, because I've had the opportunity now to be on the other side, being the actual fighter, the guy getting arrested, and you're in control of yourself watching the staff. They dictate kind of where you go and what you do. And the trooper has no idea what that's going on. And it's controlled, which I think needs to be done because I think people have a lot of takeaways from it. They learn where they need work and that, hey, I'm exhausted, but I don't have to go where I don't have to go to that deadly force tool right away. I actually still have more in the tank and can use my other tools on the belt. So that's why I think it's got a lot of value for the guys and girls in Fever.
No, I thought it was great. And Chris, I know you haven't met BJ in person, but if you think I'm big, we're approximately the same size, but BJ is probably 2 to 3 times stronger than I am. I mean, I've seen him backhand somebody over the hood of a car. So I'm sure he would love that. But again, yeah.
What you're saying is BJ needs to go with a few other of your classmates that were built like big bricks.
He would love it. He would absolutely love it. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, that sounds like amazing. That sounds like a great time. And that's, like you said, I think that's actually probably one of the better training scenarios. I mean, it's hard to kind of replicate that, to kind of see what people are going to do, because, like you said, when it gets amped up, and Charlie, we talked about this, obviously at length, but I think there's nothing more dangerous than a scared person with a gun, right? And I think that, like you said, it teaches you, one, to be under control, to two, to also think while you are tired. And obviously some of that comes with playing sports, and, we've all played college ball, and, there's nothing more difficult than, an 80-yard drive, and now you're 5 minutes in, and you got to remember the play. You're like, shit, I don't remember what I'm supposed to do. I'm tired, right? So, and also, like you said, like the recall, the fine motor skills, all of those things, you can't replicate. It's hard to replicate that outside of when it actually happened. And, it's also a good way to see, I think with Tiger, we talked about this plenty of time. I think one of the first questions you should be asked when you sign up is, have you ever been punched in the mouth before? Because when that happens, you can't replicate that. It is different. It is strange to see what people do when that stress level kicks in.
No, absolutely. And then, Chris, sorry, you just reminded me of stuff, and it's great having BJ here, because one of the other things I enjoyed about state police training is I believe it was every night, but I can't recall. But I think I'm just going to say, for whatever, we would work out together every night. We would do workouts as a unit, and CrossFit, running, weightlifting, whatever it was. And for me, and Chris, maybe you could speak to it, because some of the cadre were like, why don't I get this level of enthusiasm from you in the classroom? You come here and you're like a different man. It's like 9 o'clock at night and you're throwing around 315, 220, whatever it was, depending on the exercise. I was like, because I like this, that classroom stuff, I'm about to fucking fall out.
Yeah. That was actually, as the cadre staff, that was the time that I really enjoyed, because we took that cadre hat came off for 45 minutes, whatever it was. And it's like, because I was a detective at the time. So, when you get out, if you get into something, you need help, like, it's going to be me. I'll be you, because you coming down south, if I remember correctly, not far from where I was working at the time. So it was going to be like, well, I don't need them to think of me as that one screaming and yelling at all the time. Like, this isn't the cadre hat comes off and the coworker hat comes on. It's probably the best way to put it. Oh, we loved it because you could laugh a little bit and, suffer together. I think, those were a lot of fun times, watching people realize how uncoordinated certain people are and stuff like that. Kind of makes you laugh a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I left that part out. The cadre would work out with us as well, so everybody was getting it in. Period. The end, which I think was huge. I'd never seen that before. I've been through like 5 different academies, and again, that's something that never happens. They never work out with you. It's always they're the cadre, you're the recruit or whatever. But like you just said, at some point when you're done, we're going to be working together, and it can't be like, oh, that guy's a fucking asshole.
Right. I mean, it's a small agency, right? I mean, like, different from other state police agencies. There's a little over 300 of us.
Yeah.
We're complemented at 350. We're getting there now.
Oh,
but,
nice.
So we know, you have to know everybody. I just liked it because it was a chance to work out and throw some weight around and be like, if I have an expectation of you doing this, like, I'm going to do it with you. And then that way, that, like, if I'm like that fight on the Friday, like, I'm going to put you through it and I'm going to be there, but knowing that, I did it already too. So. Yeah,
I loved it. And then one last thing on the training, because I do want to get into some of the case stuff, but again, BJ, I don't know if I told you this, but one of the other aspects of training was, I think it was the night before or 2 nights before, we would do, I don't know what you guys call it on the cadre side, but a celebration where we went to like, and again, stop me if I'm not allowed to talk about these things, but we would all go to like a lake house, and it was basically like a party thing. Everybody had their favorite can of whatever they were dipping. We had moose meat. We were drinking. We were on the lake. We had a bonfire. Like that that bonding. I think that's when everybody was like, it was like a celebration with the cadre who trained you. And to me, I mean, that holds a special place for me. I still remember it now, so many years later. That was huge. And it's something that I think is sorely lacking. And I don't know that every agency could do that. But could you speak on that a little? Like, where did that come from? Is that something that's still going on, or where did that come from? Because I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, they call it troop night. So basically, it's, we'll say for the episode, the podcast, it's a dinner as a group. It's the best way to put. It's the best way, which it really is. It's a chance for, hey, you guys have been through this training. Like, you've earned the title trooper. So congratulations. Like, now you're part of the family. You're not just, recruit or whatever. You've officially become part of the family, and it's a chance to kind of, for me, it was one of the nights I remember, because the chance for it, that the cadre had to officially come off, and you guys get to know, like, me as who I am now, right? And who I'm going to be when you get out on the road and, we're working together. So I thought it was great. I don't know where the tradition came from. It came from before I was on, but they still have it. It's just been scaled and moved around appropriately based on the way the academies are run.
Yep, which I know it's changed. Yeah, I know it's changed. If I would have been overnight. Yeah.
No, not anymore. It's not overnight anymore.
Well, so I appreciate that. Let's get into some of the case stuff, because we talked about chases, negotiator work. You worked the downtown riots in Portland, Maine, and also you had homicide cases. So I'll kind of leave it to you to guide where you want to go with that, where you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you one of my favorite. I still joke about it. It's when I was out on field training. So our field training was a little different probably than how it is in Hillsborough, but it was 45 shifts after you got out of the academy. So I'm on field training with one of the troopers who ends up working in my shift years after. And so I'll never forget it, because it's one of those Friday nights where you're like, 24 years old, fresh out of the academy. I think it was, probably 2 or 3 weeks into the FTO program. And what do you want to do on a Friday night? But you want to go, if you're not handling calls, like, you're going out and you want to get the OUI or DWI driver. And so we're out on a Friday night. We're just north of the Lewiston Auburn area, which is another big city in the patrol area that I covered, and hammering traffic all night. And those nights where you got the car all over the road. Mm-hmm. You're like, it's a rundown car. You're like, yep, I got one. And it's, Granny Smith on her way home, or it's the old lady who's just coming from working at Walmart, and you can't find anything. It's one of those style nights. And then the way our FTO program works is we would drive up in our marked cruiser to meet your FTO. You park it, and then you ride around in either theirs or yours for the shift, and then you each head home. So we're heading home, and my FTO ends up trying to stop a car that is all over the road that's drunk. Well, the next thing he knows, he's in a full-on chase. And I'm driving home, and I hear this on the radio, so I'm like, all right, I guess I got to go help. So I pipe up, I start going. Well, they're heading out to one of the main roads, and it basically runs from Lewiston, Auburn, all the way up to the Canadian border. It's a main thoroughfare.
Holy crap.
If he comes out, there is no way he's coming down. And I was in the city. So I'm like, there's no way these guys, they go the opposite way of the city. They always go like north, because once you come in the city, you've got the local departments. Nope, he comes onto the main road and comes south right towards where I am. So we have the spike mats. So I am like 3 week out of the academy trooper, and I got a car coming at me in a pursuit, and I get the four lane road, grab the spike mats, do the traditional, like, get it set up. I'm like, I'm going to throw him, but there ain't no way he's going to hit him. Throw it, and I take out all 4 tires. 3 out of 4, I think. Go back in, hop my car. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to catch this pursuit. I end up catching the tail end of it as he rides on rims for like another 8 miles.
Oh my!
In through the city, taking out, going up over the embankment, over signs. There's cruisers everywhere. They spike him again. And then I don't even remember how many cruisers there were. He ends up bailing on foot when he crashes. And one of the departments had a dog, so we stopped running. We ended up losing the guy that night, so it's kind of a frustrating story at the end. We knew who it was. We ended up finding him, arresting him later. But the best part of that story for me is I am on FTO, and the guy that was training me had like 20 years on at the time, or 17, somewhere in that area, had never even deployed his spike mats once, and I took out 3 on my first throw of a spike mat. So, I mean, it's stuff like that made working as a rural patrol trooper a lot of fun.
Yeah, BJ and we weren't in FTO, but we were actually just talking about it before we started this. We had been in a couple of vehicle pursuits and jumped out, and there's one, we call it the sugar sand incident. We were chasing this dude. They just stole a bunch of stuff. They stole a gun, and I was on him. BJ was backing me up, and we're chasing them, and we're doing the whole thing. I ended up pitting him. It wasn't a good pit, but they stopped. They bailed out, and BJ is on him. And I'm like, and I can see his flashlight, and I see his flashlight tumble down, and I'm like, yeah, good job, BJ. And I'm like, where is he? I'm looking around for him, and BJ's like, he's coughing and choking up sand because they had run in between 2 houses that were under construction, and so he had tripped on the sugar sand, and it was just buried in it. But go ahead, BJ, because I think you had sand in your belt for 3 years.
Yeah, so we're talking about it because I was like, I always wonder what your perspective on that was, because I remember being obviously the second car, and I shit you not, you have to tell the story a little bit. So the neighborhood that they ended up running into was like an older, established neighborhood, and these just happened to be the only 2 houses in this fucking neighborhood that happened to be getting they're building new houses. So they just done the foundation. There's not drywall, there's no drywall, nothing, right? It's just fucking concrete and fucking sand. And it's obviously in the middle of the night, so you can't really see. We just street lights. And I'm like, well, they could not have picked a better 2 houses to run between. It's almost like running from the sidewalk onto the fucking beach. And I don't know, I'm just looking at the guy, probably maybe we had the X26 taser in the car, so I was obviously well within taser range, because I had the taser right. So I'm like, I'm yelling at him, boy, you better fucking stop, I'm gonna tase you. And I'm like, I gotta be within 10 feet. I'm like, I can see we're about to get the key to the fucking city. We're gonna, dabble us up, because everything you dream about, right? Yeah. Cops, robbers, whatever. And I swear to God, I hit that shit, and it was sliding in the fucking second base. The dragon taser person. I'm like, and now imagine, when you playing baseball, you slide in, you get a little dirt, a little clay in your belt, nah. This was it was inside my Under Armour shirt, inside my vest, inside, I remember taking out my gun. I couldn't even get my gun back in the holster and close my holster all the way because there was just so much sand. It was terrible. And the worst part was he's all excited. He's like, where's you get up? I'm like, nah, man. So I had to get up and hop another couple, 2 fences. And this was probably maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Correct.
Before the end of the shift. And so the sun's coming up because we got K9 out, aviation's up. And so now as the sun comes up, now you can actually see my uniform, and it's just completely fucking terrible. I look like I just rolled on the beach, like I had a night on the beach with some lady, and it was fucking horrible. So yeah, I still have that belt, and I'm sure there's still sand in that belt somewhere, for sure.
Yeah, I laughed out because Chris basically he got all stoved up and ended up at the pucker brush for Maine terminology.
Yeah, the good old pucker brush.
The good old pucker brush, the sugar sand of Florida. Oh my God! All right, what else, Chris? I love that. That's a good story, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny having the chance to, talk to you guys from just, north to south. Like, you're in that one county, and I remember we had another chase probably 20, maybe like 3-4 years ago. So I go back to the road as a patrol supervisor, and I think that's the last time you and I saw you, because it was back when you were working up here with the agency. So we about supervising the highway right there, 295 through Portland. I'm listening to the radio and, scanning the local sheriff's offices and whatever, and I hear one of the local sheriff's offices they come across the radios, I just got rammed or I just got hit, and I, turn it up, start listening to it. It's in the town that I live in. I'm like 25 miles away. I'm like, oh, the nights where you're just like, I'm not going to catch it, but I'm just going to listen to it because it'll be good entertainment. So I'm listening to it, and they end up start coming on one of the main thoroughfares from out in the western area where I am in towards the city of Portland. Like, I'm just going to go hop on, because that road connects all the way to the interstate. I'm going to get off the interstate and just drive out in that general direction, see if they continue down this way. So the guy, I think it hit a cruiser, ends up almost taking another cruiser head on, gets spiked, takes out three tires, I think 2 or 3 tires again. Well, up here, we're the only agency that's been trained to pit. We're the only agency that can pit. And my version of a pit training had been when I was a detective. I hadn't done anything recently. So you're talking that had been a few years. So here I am, a new patrol supervisor back on the road, and I end up driving right at them. It's just my luck again. They end up coming right at me. So I make the flip, and I had known the patrol supervisor for the sheriff's office at the time. I said, if I get over there, do you want me to take lead on the chase and pit it? They said, yep. So it's been going on for about 20 miles. It's been a 20-mile chase all through a couple towns. I end up jumping in, taking over the pursuit, and then following it for a few miles until I was able to pit it. I pit him. It's successful. So I get out, draw down on him, and I can hear it. One of the sheriffs pull up next to me with this dog. So I confront him, and the guy takes off running down the street. My initial instinct was like, go get him. And then I've been with other guys who have done that and end up needing a new set of pants because the dog decides to take a nibble out of them. So I stop as they send the dog. Well, the dog gets confused. This guy runs down the street. We end up in a foot chase with him. The dog ends up biting one of the deputies. He comes up to a car that's just stopped in the middle of the road because it's, 10:30, 11 at night on a main thoroughfare. And he's trying to I run up to the driver's side, and the deputies run on the other side. And we're kind of getting ready to parallel. Well, this guy stops at the car and is I didn't realize it at the time, trying to jiggle. And I look, and all I see is just something disappear. And I hear, when you hear that body on body followed by the pavement? So, so I hear that, and I run around the corner, and it was basically the blindside hit of a football player. He hits him, and then we just pile on, and it's the dog's biting like 2 other deputies as we're all piling on. We're trying to knock the dog off from us. We end up cuffing him. And one of the funnier parts of that is, the typical jabs between at least up here, you remember it, like the sheriff's office and the state police. We all do work together, but we like to give each other jabs a little bit. And they said, oh, I tackled him. I said, yeah, but you would have still been chasing him if it wasn't for me. So we got to have a little interagency jabs back and forth, which up here we can do because we actually do get along with each other fairly well because, well, sometimes we're our only backup. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that happens. I think that happens everywhere, but I, I can hear the sounds in my head that you just described.
Yeah.
And I'm actually having a nice little extra laugh because I know exactly what you're talking about.
I was frustrated because I picked one side of the car and thinking he was going to make it around the car and I would have been able to come the back side. And it's one of those where you're looking at it and you go, man, you got to have all the fun. But I'll go jump in on the end. But no,
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
no, I was just going to say that's just another chase that popped up since we were talking on, some of the fun stuff we got to work with.
Yeah, and again, that's something unique to Maine, especially as a trooper, because in Hillsborough, if you need backup or you got a call, the universe will fall all around you. You'll have 20, 30 cops everywhere. It don't work like that in Maine. You might have one guy that's, 2 hours away. And I've talked about it before, but where I've run code for so long, I had to stop and get gas and keep running code. And for people who are in bigger agencies, they're like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I talk to, about, whether it's some of the local guys I'm friends with or other, agencies out of state. I was at some training years and years ago, and I'll never forget it. It was a local officer in a city somewhere, I think in New York or Connecticut somewhere. And they're like, yeah, I don't go to a domestic by myself. I wait, the 2 minutes, if I get on scene, I wait the 2 minutes. I'm like, 2 minutes. I go, I've been to domestics and literally am taking, the drunk husband on one arm and the wife on the other and just literally pushing them in two separate directions because my backup's a deputy that's coming from, halfway across the county to do that.
I'm trying not to get into all the differences in the training, but it just keeps popping up because, again, it's something that these are just things I dealt with that you've dealt with. But one of the new things for me was as a trooper, you don't have the plexiglass separating you from the people you're transporting. You would transport your prisoners or whatever, the people you've arrested, in the passenger seat. And I didn't realize what a tool it was in Hillsborough County, where you would separate people, put them in the back seat of your car because they were controlled. You can't just put them in your trooper car. You got to learn how to use space and time and separate them in that regard. I don't think I've ever told BJ that one. Yeah, imagine trying to work cases in Hillsborough where you had no plexiglass to separate them. You had to just use space. You couldn't put them in your car.
Yeah, we don't have the arrestee sits in the front passenger seat.
Even if they want to spit or whatever, I've had to drive people to jail with my hand on their head against the window so they don't try to spit on me.
No spit,
even with that.
No, I mean we got the spit. We do have spit hoods and everything, but it's the hard part is sometimes we're so rural out here that, like, I mean, I've had guys who are like, I got to take a leak. I'm like, sorry, dude. And like, I just fought with you. I put you in handcuffs. I put you in the car, and you think I'm going to uncuff you to take a piss? Like,
absolutely.
You're going to have to hold it for the hour and a half we go to jail, and then they end up pissing in your seat right next to you, and that happened while I was on FTO. I got that experience too.
Oh yeah.
I got to take my car to the garage to go get decon. Some guy just took a piss in my front passenger seat as I was pushing his head the other way so he didn't try to spit on me because I wasn't going to stop to try to put spit of it on the side of the road.
Oh yeah, and you referenced it, but we could talk about it if you want. So when I was working with the Secret Service up in Maine, we worked together for, I believe it was the Trump campaign. I mean, I think there was a little mix of both Biden and Trump, but mostly I think you and I worked a lot of the Don Jr., the different things. I can't remember. I think you were with me with Laura Trump when she was with the bus driving through Portland.
Oh, the pink bus driving through Portland.
Yeah, Women for Trump, the big giant 45-foot bus.
Yeah.
What was that like on your perspective? Because I never did that on the local side, and I got so kind of numb to it on the Secret Service side. Like, I mean, did you guys like, this is awesome, or were you like, this is a pain in the ass? I mean, what was the perspective on your side? Because we used a lot of manpower.
Yeah. So the first time you do it, it's kind of interesting, right?
Yep.
You know how something new you never really done before. So I think I was with you for like 2 days, right?
Yep.
It was a couple of days. So the first day you're kind of like, okay, this is just seeing how the operation works. You know, when you get to peek behind the curtain, like you only see it from far away. It's pretty interesting, just the equipment and, you know, the gear that you guys have, and just getting a chance to talk to, you know, some of the agents from all over. But then after that, I'm like, I couldn't do this. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like talking to what they have to go through. And then, yeah, it's cool for me. I just drive, right? I think we just drove around and went to a few places. I got, you know, some of our newer people a chance to say they worked with the family of the president. And, you know, that's the part that's cool, is saying you work. You know, I think Trump came to Northern Maine in 2020, and I was on our crowd management team, and I got to work some crowd control for that. It's pretty cool to see you know, how he lands from, you know, what's it, Marine One or whatever. So like, it's cool to do it once, and you know, very rarely, but overall it really is kind of all right, we're just going to drive around, and, you know, I shut off exit ramps, and I literally drive there, shut the exit ramp off, have to deal with the pissed off people who can't go on the highway.
Yep.
And then to watch, you know, a convoy go by to take a couple minutes, whatever it is, and then open it back up and then do it again, you know, 4 or 5 hours later. So, you know, cool the first time you do it, just to say you did it. And then after that, it's one of those where, you know, for us up here, that we don't get those dignitaries that often. You know,
Yeah.
Maine's not looked at as a political hotbed. So for us up here, it's definitely got a lot more like, oh, this is kind of cool. I mean, we do have, you know, retired presidents that live up here, and they've been very friendly to the guys that work down there, but that's a whole different ball game. But for me, that time, it was like, all right, this is cool. I hadn't seen you in a while, so we got to hang out and, you know, catch up. But I'm like, at the end of the second day, I'm like, yeah, bye, like go, like I'm ready just to go back to doing my regular job.
Yeah, it's one thing that, again, don't think the Secret Service does well enough. I mean, it's up kind of to the advanced team, and obviously I knew you, so we had that relationship. But, you know, the Secret Service rolls into these different states and cities. They tie up all this manpower. They do all these briefs. They have this expectation of what can be done. And peeking back a little bit behind the curtain even more, you'll have staffers going, oh yeah, we'll just shut this road down, this road down. I'm like, you're just saying words. You don't understand you don't understand the manpower that it requires and how many pissed off people you're shutting down traffic for hours, just to do these little, you know, OTR, these little off the record movements and stuff like, and then we're like, hey, and then the protectee leaves, we're like, thanks guys. And we just bounce. And then the local guys are stuck dealing with that and the complaints and all the other bullshit. I tried to extend that olive branch only because I was local, but a lot of these, I mean, you got agents that are 25, 26 years old, never had a job outside, you know, they went to college and then became a Secret Service agent, and they just like, all right, cool, bye. It's wild.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was what I think made it enjoyable, is you and I got to work together. I think we had, you know, you reached out, said, hey, this is what's going on. What can you offer? Because it was actually, I think I reached out to you because I think we were told because we have an executive protection unit who.
Yeah, you guys knew before we did.
With. Yeah, because our EPU did. So it was that's cool, because I think we hung out and got to catch up, which is nice. But I know the President Biden was up here last November after the mass shooting we had up here, and it was a gesture to, you know, for the community. But I do know, in talking with some of the officers, like trying to contain that after the week that they had and the week that they had experienced, and without getting too much into it, I saw some of those. I was in that city later that night for another investigation the night that he came, and seeing a look on their face after the week that those guys had just been through, the week that I had been through, and knowing that they just had to do that was like, the gesture was, well, I mean, that's a whole nother issue, but you know what the gesture was meant to be, but it turns into the people don't see the stress that it adds when you have a department. that's that size and the resources that it takes and the manpower hours that it takes. And it just, yeah. And then some guys just say, okay, thanks, and peace out. And you're left with the picking everything up.
Yeah. And again, it goes to a lot of people have never worked local. And so they're like, well, we did this in New York. We did this in DC. We did this in LA. It's like, yeah, those agencies are very different.
Right.
They have a lot more manpower. Well, Chris, we've had you on for almost an hour. I'd be remiss though. We had a couple things, negotiator, the riots, and then maybe a homicide. And then I've tried to be respectful of your time, brother.
All right. Yeah. I mean, so it was pretty cool. They had the negotiation team openings within a year of getting out of the academy, getting off probation. I was able to be selected and put on the team. And we worked hand in hand with our tactical team.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the unique opportunity, and it's Maine. Everyone's like, oh, you guys don't have a lot. And I think it averaged close to 30 to 40 call-outs per year.
For a team that's only like 23 tech guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And there was at the time, we talked earlier about driving code, getting gas and driving it again. I've gone from the southern half of the state all the way to the Canadian border, tried to negotiate with a guy, and, I don't remember the outcome. I think he came out or something. He comes out, we're grabbing dinner with couple of negotiators, couple of the tech guys, and then there's another call 2 towns over from where I live. So however many of us go back down code all the way. So I literally went from basically the New Hampshire border to the Canadian border back down to where I live, all in a span of, like 12 hours.
Yeah.
So of that, 8 was driving. The rest was not. But no, I've had a couple interesting calls. Had one guy was barricaded in a car in a cemetery in one of the local cities up here. And some of the cities don't have the resources to have their own tactical team. So we would come in to assist them if they had something that rose to that level. I spent 5.5 hours. I don't remember much of the details because this was probably, 15 years ago now. But we talked for the better part of 5.5 hours. And, when they say we think we've succeeded in doing something. So we say, yep. I'm like, yep, he's going to come out. He ended up taking his own life while I was on the phone with him. You hear the pop, and someone goes, I don't know what happened. And I remember hearing the radio traffic go, I just heard a pop, and they go, yeah, we're pretty sure he's not alive. So, I range from that to the funniest one that it just popped into my head as we're talking about this was, it's in the same city again, guys barricaded, and I'm on the PA in our armored car trying to get him to, to talk to us. And he ends up calling 911. He starts talking to me. We get disconnected. He calls back in and ends up talking to the team commander. Well, the team commander says, hey, I got him on the phone. He just hung up. He's ripe for the picking. He's ready to come out. So I say, okay, pick up the phone, call him back. I don't think I'd heard more F-bombs and told where I was going to take a dump in my life. He went up one side of me, down the other. And then basically was like, I'm not coming out. He ended up not coming out. I think the outcome was he ended up taking it. I guess it's my luck. Maybe that's why I don't negotiate anymore. He took his life too. So, but yeah, those are the negative ones. I've had my fair share where they're like, he's not coming out. I had one probably a couple of years ago. The local department been trying to call him, talk to him. I rolled up in the armored car, identified myself, and said, hey, man, you want to come on out? Door opens. He walks right out, and they go, I spent more time driving here than I did actually on scene. So, it's been a little, I've had the ups and downs, but it's a unique chance to have that opportunity to do those things up here too. So.
Well, that's always fun. I mean, it's nice to be on a specialty team. Now, I will ask a question. do you find that the specialty teamwork got in the way, or did it hinder your movement throughout the agency?
Throughout the agency, no. I stepped down. I actually had to step down from the negotiating team because it was getting so busy, along with my regular job was so busy as a homicide guy, that I just was never home. So like I was handling workload fine, but I had 2 young kids at the time, and it was one of those where I made the decision to try to spend some time with my kids, and then I took a break for about 4 years, and then I went back to negotiating. I did another 3 until just recently, where being a supervisor and on a specialty like that, I felt like I was doing a disservice to the guys I supervise with the, trying to supervise them and then be called away for it. So I wanted to focus on them. But no, it actually, I think, helped me within the agency, because it exposed me to a lot of those calls that maybe I wouldn't have gotten in my patrol area. Exposure to the high risk incidents to show, who I am and how I actually work from different supervisors across the state from south to north. So I think it actually in the end gave that opportunity to have other people across the state get a chance to interact with me.
Well, Chris, I think that's a good tie-in. Do you think that helped you with the riots that occurred downtown at Portland? And can you touch on that?
Yeah, I think it did. I'll preface this with this 2020. So our version of a disorderly riot is probably not even rising to the realm of anything in some of these bigger cities. But for a city like Portland and a state like us, it was relatively unheard of before. But I think the ability of the specialties and the ability to really remain calm when you're on what happened was they had a couple of the protests, the BLM protests there in 2020 after George Floyd was killed. And they tried to force entry in towards Portland PD. So Portland, which is the biggest city in the state, and they do everything. They have their own teams for everything. They do the homicides. They hit it. They actually reached out and basically an all call and requested any available unit to go into the city to help prevent the PD from getting overrun. They were spray painting the front of the PD. They were trying to work up a barrier that they created to get in the front door. So I got the chance. I lived pretty close. I was on the crowd management team at the time, which we just had a little bit more training than a normal trooper. And the ability to stand on a line, and I think my nickname was Bitch Baby. I was called Bitch Baby by one of the protests, and that's all they looked at me. They just called me Bitch Baby, and I didn't laugh, but after the fact, you could tell people got worked up with it. But yeah, it was for up here. The riots brought a lot of the agencies closer together, because Portland was very much an agency, rightfully so, that could basically deal with their own stuff. And very rarely did they ask for help. They asked that night, and I think we sent 60 plus troopers down into the city. We sent the whole Southern Field Division, the 2 troops, A and B, the Turnpike, like all those guys went into the cities and worked a little bit on basically. By the end of the night, I was standing in a line with local officers, sheriff's deputies, side by side, moving under the command of a Portland officer who was dictating where our platoon was moving, just because they were plugging and playing to clear the streets. So it was a unique opportunity when we were breaking down to look to both sides of me, and it didn't matter the badge, the uniform. We were all one, working as one law enforcement agency, law enforcement in general in the state of Maine, to just calm everything down. So I spent that summer and winter just pretty much in the city of Portland, making sure they were all set and developed some good bonds with a lot of the guys down there now. So,
that kind of ties back into the training, not to keep bringing it back to that, but again, the state of Maine, everybody who's in law enforcement, and I don't know if it's still the same way, they all train at the same training center, and then they go out to all their different sheriffs, cities, whatever it is, even state troopers. Everybody has to go through the basic level of training, which I think at the time was 6 months long. So you were able to maintain some of those relationships, but also you knew that you'll have at least a baseline of training and what that training was. Again, I think it's something that's lacking in some of the bigger states. I don't know that it's feasible in states like Florida or New York or Texas or something like that. But again, this is just adding to the fact that I kind of like, now that I've been through so many different academies and worked with all the different kinds of law enforcement, you see that there are differences when you start casting around the different agencies, and not let alone the state, but throughout the United States.
Yeah, it's cool because you go and the guy for the local department that was in charge, I walk in and one of them had been my cadre when I was in the basic academy, and one of the other ones was a classmate of mine when I was in the basic academy. So I go, here I am. We go, oh, you want, the typical ribbon back and forth that you have, but it knocked down that barrier that, it made it very fortunate for us to have that, because I'm like, I show up and like, what do you need, man? Like, hey, can you do this? Yep, got it. We got it covered. Don't worry about it. We'll do that for you. It wasn't anything like that, and we were able to resolve it as one law enforcement community. That I think it's one thing I'm very fortunate about living and working up here is that I know a lot of other states, some of them you can't operate that way. They're too big.
Yeah, no, and that's understandable. These are just, again, things I'm starting to notice now that I'm a little removed from it, and having worked with different agencies. But Chris, I'd be remiss, homicide, got one or two stories, and then, again, trying to respect your time.
Yeah, no, so it's been pretty unique up here for homicides. A lot of people don't realize how busy I think we are. Sorry. I don't think a lot of people realize how busy we are up here. So my first experience with homicides, so I got promoted right out of the troop that I was working in, and then went into the homicide unit. And I think within 6 months, I was the primary investigator on a homicide. So I'm just trying to yeah, it's one of those where I think a son shot and killed his mother in one of the towns. We went in and I got to do the full interview from start to finish, got to write the warrants, all that stuff. So it was pretty unique to be, 6-month-on detective, and you're being tasked with sitting next to the prosecutor, the attorney general, as we were sitting there charging a guy with killing his mother for a homicide. So yeah. I'm just trying to think of, I got to go back and figure out which ones are closed, which ones are open, because we still got a lot of the ones that we've worked recently. We had, I think probably my proudest moment as a good story we had, I think, was it started in as a tragedy. A mother was found dead with her boyfriend at the time, and then the 2 young kids were at the home at the time. So it came in as a double homicide, and we didn't know who did it. No indication whatsoever who was involved. It's, your typical, they're in the drug game, so people had always been in and out of the house, and started with slow going of, all right, her car's missing. So we start doing some work, and we find out that her cell phone's missing. So we started doing some of the technology aspect of it, and we work and we develop, well, this is the route that the phone travels. We find the phone coincidentally right out in front of one of our barracks. Just happened to be where it was. Start pulling security cameras, can find that the car is driving, find out where the car is. As we're doing that, we find out neighbor's got a Ring camera. You see this guy leaving, and he's dressed in all black with like a black sweatsuit with red, like sneakers, Nikes on. So we end up backtracking him. We find him with other people that we had interacted with, other witnesses and friends of our victims earlier in the day and earlier that weekend. He had come up from Connecticut and had come up here to do a drug run. So we ended up working. It was pretty cool because we worked with the local department that helped us grab some of these surveillance videos. We did our cell phone stuff.
Yep. Sorry about that.
All right. Where'd you lose me?
Where there was a guy, you were talking about how you were backtracking.
Oh yeah. So we backtracked and were able to get a good photo on this guy.
Yep.
The local departments helped us with that. And then we do some interviews. They tell us who this guy, the name of this guy. We identify him, and he's got a warrant for his arrest for like a probation violation out of New York. So while we're doing that, our forensic team's able to lift a print. We find the vehicle stolen down in Mass, get a new cell phone number that he bought. We write warrants on that, get text messages that he's sending asking about how long you think you get for double murder in Maine, get the fingerprint off the shifter of the car. And then he's found down out Montgomery County, Maryland, right outside of DC. Myself and the lead detective at the time left Maine at 6:00 at night, drive all the way down to Montgomery County, Maryland. He's arrested at 10 a.m. the next morning. They have a fugitive team. They end up arresting him. And then this detective does one of the best interviews I've ever witnessed or been a part of. And he did all the talking. I just sat in another room and watched. Gets a full confession out of this guy, including a fist pump from the killer that looks at him, looks at the video, and then says, "You got me," and gives him a fist bump. And I'm watching it from the other room as I'm taking notes and relaying stuff back to the guys and girls up here. And the detective comes out and I go, "Did he just fist pump you?" "Yep, he did." So seeing a cold-blooded murderer who just killed two people fist pump a detective was pretty cool. And then he pled out a couple years ago to life in prison for 2, which for up here is pretty rare for life. So, yeah, I'd say that's one of the ones that I got to work. And we had a newer unit at the time because there'd been a huge rollover of retirements and promotions. So you had some of these guys, it was their first case that they'd ever worked as a homicide. Within 2 weeks, we had, it was like under 2 weeks, we had him arrested in custody. So
Dude, that's
pretty unique for up here.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, Chris, I think I definitely would love to have you back on because I'm sure you got a bunch more, but I appreciate your time. And BJ, anything you want to leave with, brother?
No, man, I appreciate you coming on with us, Dan. It was definitely a pleasure.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. And yeah, we'll get together and I'll ask you two some questions and you guys can tell some stories.
Oh, yeah. So good. So we got another one on the book. Yep. I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate your time. Just hold on for 1 second with me.